Hey friends, this is Mark Suroviec, host of the Workplace Solutions podcast, inviting you to discover the joy of work. Part 2 with my good friend Teddy Sanders. Teddy, let's go ahead and start with an icebreaker question, as we do by tradition. If you were a pro wrestler, what would your WWE name be, and what would be kind of your finishing move?
That is a great question. So, grew up as a big WCW fan.
Okay.
And old school WWF. Like Ultimate Warrior was like my guy. And then it was Sting. And I just found out I had an affinity for like face paint.
I started imagining Sting the singer.
Oh, yeah.
Like the fields of gold, cotton, or jumping in the ring. I was like, he's going to get his tail whooped.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not quite. Not quite. I don't know. I would probably lean into like looking like Hagrid from Harry Potter.
Okay.
I think I would probably be called Baby Hagrid. And I think my finishing move would be thinking I'm doing something right and being helpful and actually just getting in the way. I think that's what I would be. But being fiercely loyal during the process.
Oh, there you go.
About you?
This is one of those questions that I ask all the time and never think of my own because I'm so eager to hear what other people say. I'm going to go with the finisher.
Okay.
And just be mysterious. So just wear like a black like ninja outfit and not like have a black belt or anything, but just kind of some outfit like that that's fully covered and you don't know what this guy's about. And I would just stand there mysteriously and I don't know, just make up some crap and pin somebody.
Okay.
I think I would try to come up with a different move every time. I don't think I would want a signature move. I would want to almost improv my moves, be like, oh, I wonder if somebody has a bass guitar I can throw at somebody, like is there a harpoon gun in the audience, I
think you're thinking Grand Theft Auto instead of wrestling.
I'm taking wrestling to the next level, Ted.
Yeah.
That's what we do. So Ed McMahon or whoever
not Ed McMahon.
Not Ed McMahon. Jim McMahon? Who's the wrestling guy? The guy that runs the wrestling?
Oh gosh, isn't Ed McMahon the guy who was on the Johnny Carson show?
Yeah, he was. Okay. He was also the one. The Publishers Clearinghouse would show up at your door. You won $1 million.
I honestly can't remember his name. I know his son's name is Shane, but it is McMahon.
It's something. Yeah.
Yeah. Vince
McMahon. All right, Mr. McMahon, if you are listening, I have some ideas about the future of professional wrestling. So,
primarily, if you could just do a constant role play of Ed McMahon giving people fake checks, that'd be great.
I would come up there with a fake check, but it would be covered in battery acid. I don't know.
Good Lord. That got dark real fast.
Not all my ideas are gold on the first try.
Sure.
Yeah, we talked about the lip box in previous episodes, so we rewind that one 5 seconds. We're here with Teddy. Teddy is a talent acquisition specialist, is a Renaissance man having a lot of interests, and thankfully, I'm excited that Teddy is just so brilliant and interesting and well-read and thoughtful and kind. And so I'm thrilled that he's here. We're going through the mailbag and just answering questions of each other and having fun doing it. So what is on your list? Where do you want to start?
I like this one. What is it about your job that helps you be satisfied or fulfilled? And I think my follow-up question for that is, how do you, or maybe this is the question asked before, how do you differentiate between being content and being fulfilled?
Man, I knew Teddy was going to make me think. Yeah, I would say fulfilled and content are two different things. Content is kind of almost a higher category for folks that are from a faith background. There's an interesting book that was written in the Puritan days called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment by Jeremiah Burroughs, which is really, really interesting read.
That's also a great wrestler name.
Oh, Jeremiah Burroughs?
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll give you my finishing move is the content bomb.
There you go.
I love it. We're laughing, having fun. When I think fulfillment, when I think about being fulfilled, it's an alignment with who you are at a core level, what motivates you. I've been recently reviewing my Enneagram profile and seeing I'm an Enneagram 8, which is the
Challenger?
It's that one.
Okay.
Yep, it's that one. And seeing that idea of debate and challenge, but also protector. The 8 is also the protector, and seeing how that played out in my management style. But really, I see fulfillment as saying what I'm doing has purpose, it has value. It might be hard, but it's not life-sucking or life-draining. So when I'm tired, my soul isn't exhausted, if that makes sense. So that's what I think about. And I'm an entrepreneur now, so I've started my own business, and it's exciting. I love a challenge. I love new things. I love things that are novel. I like picking up new skills. I look at my professional career over the last few years and think of how many things I know how to do now that I didn't know how to do, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Project management, survey design, LMS authoring, all of these interesting things. So I'm loving it. Let's spin the wheel of embarrassing moments.
Okay.
I said this in the very first podcast that we want to do this as often as possible. So tell us a story of professional failure where you're the person that screwed up, not somebody else. And give us enough detail without taking up the rest of the podcast, and kind of what did you learn from it?
So I was a instructor, professor, teaching paramedics, teaching nurses. And that was very intense because, especially with some of the medical students, I don't know when they take the class on how to become a narcissist, but this had already happened. That was a tricky part for me.
We're going to get some hate mail on that one.
Yeah, probably. That's okay. I got broad shoulders. I'll take it.
If you'd like to send hate mail, it's hate mail
That's right.
at teddysanders.net.
Yes.
Not a real website.
.co. We're growing.
I really hope there's not a Teddy Sanders out there that we just mowed over. We broke our own rule of the mailbag. We screwed the other Teddy Sanders.
I know it was a character in the movie Neighbors, and then it was also the head of NASA in the book The Martian.
Okay.
Teddy Sanders.
Oh.
Yep. Those are my two claims to fame.
There are thousands of Mark Surovics that appear.
Well, there you go.
You cannot see me shaking my head in the negative on the podcast.
So going back to biggest professional blunder, most embarrassing moment was...
And it doesn't have to be the most embarrassing, just one you're willing to share.
Because I taught in these areas and I was working on the ambulance at the time, I had a lot of practical students come and work with me. And had a student who was very well-intentioned, and we were dealing with a traumatic injury. And I asked him to hop out and get the patient ready for departure out of the ambulance. When I said that, we were still on the road and going about 45 miles an hour. And he opened the door and attempted to get out.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And for me, that was so embarrassing, or I felt like it was a professional blunder, because I just assumed, hey, no, that meant when we stopped the vehicle, not when we're going 45 miles an hour down a pretty busy road. And at the end of the day, it was like, it's a funny story to tell. I've gotten permission from this student over the years to tell it. He was like, yeah, it was silly of me. I just got caught in the moment. But for me, it was embarrassing because it's like, I didn't meet this person where their needs were at in that moment in time. And he ended up being one of my EMT partners many, many years later. And he was like, remember that time? I'm like, don't talk about it. Just don't. So I would say that that's the one that comes immediately to mind, but I'm going to keep thinking because I know I've mucked up a few times.
Well, as I was trying to name the company and think of what the blog would be or what podcast I wanted to do, I almost just came up with a fail blog.
Okay.
And so I'm going to share those from time to time because I started writing a notebook of all of these embarrassing things that I've tried and failed at. And if each one was a post, it's going to be probably its own book.
Yep.
But the one that comes to mind right now, I was running the zip line on a challenge course. And instead of climbing up a tree or up a platform, almost like a pirate plank that you kind of, this wide platform that you ran off the end of and zipped into the woods. And it was the first kid to go. It was this school group, and he was excited, and I'm explaining how this works. So I'm like, you kind of sit down in your harness, and gravity kind of takes you down the zip line. And he's looking at me, and in hindsight, I realized he didn't understand what I was saying. Was trying to explain the physics of it when I should have just gave him much more simple directions. And so what he did was, instead of stepping off the platform and letting gravity take him down the zip line, he just jumped straight up, kicked his legs out in front of him, and fell on his butt, bounced a couple times, and then went down the zip line. And what made it embarrassing, he was the first kid to go. The principal is there of the school watching, and you're always wanting to make a good impression, and we want to do this safely, and folks are nervous, and you just see this kid jump up and land on his rear, bounce a couple times, and then zip. And I'm shaking my head because I didn't think this was possible. Like I had never considered that someone would do that, but something in the way I explained it meant that that's how he interpreted my instructions. And what made matters worse, there was somebody there filming, and they put it in the video of the retreat. So we're watching the video they made of the retreat at the end, and they put it in slow motion, and I can see the shock waves travel up his body from hitting the rock there and bouncing, and I'm just like, oh, and like I'm seeing that thinking, oh, that's terrible, it's embarrassing. I'm looking at my boss going, yeah, that one was me. And just I felt so bad for him because as a facilitator in that environment, you just really want folks to have a positive experience. You don't want to do anything that causes any risk or injury, and just I it was awful. It was awful.
I get that. We'll have to do like a work play after dark, and then we can talk about like the more in-depth ones. For sure.
Yeah, well, there's some on here that'll be like, you did what?
Yeah. Is the statute of limitations over?
There's yeah, for real. There's a comedian named Mike Birbiglia, and on one of his early albums, he talks about some embarrassing things that he does, and he always likes to say, like, I'm in the future too.
Right.
He's like, I know that now.
Yeah.
Well, then I didn't think, but now.
Well, like, think about it. Think about the level of embarrassment. Like when I was a 14 or 15-year-old working at Chick-fil-A as a team member, and basically being embarrassed because I had 2 massive things of lemonade that you're trying to take out, and just doing the full splits and everything just going everywhere. You're like, oh man, that was so embarrassing. But as you get older, how that embarrassment typically surrounds like either your perception with others or others' perception around you. And that, as opposed to, I was 31 getting off the ambulance at one point in time, and literally as I'm getting out in front of a very big televised event, I bent down and my pants just ripped.
Oh no.
Wide open. And I was just like, there's no recovering. Just keep moving. I was like, I'm just glad I'm wearing something at this point.
Oh man, that's awful. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that one. That was fun. What did you learn from it? Wear different pants.
Wear different pants, and also take home for that one.
All right. We're not going to talk about that anymore.
Yep.
In our previous episode, we talked about how teams need catalytic events. So what is a catalytic event that you've been a part of, offsite or team retreat or something of that nature that was powerful and left a memory? So what did you do and what do you remember from it?
Weekend events are always really good for me, just because I'm a processor, but they're not as memorable. It's kind of like the day of events that are very memorable for me because it's more condensed and it's more of, I find in those days, there's a defined like outcome for it. It's not just camaraderie. It's not just team building. It's, hey, there's typically a learning component to it as well. Well, one of the coolest ones was getting to learn from pararescue jumpers. And the catalytic event was getting into a helicopter and actually taking massive like embankments as you're doing medical procedures on a dummy. That dummy is about $120,000 to work on. And you're getting that opportunity. That's not an everyday classroom thing. That's not anything like that. And the cool part about it, the reason why it was a catalytic event for us is we did that to show what you can do as an individual versus what you can do in a team versus what you can do in a squad. Squad for us was about 4 people. You're doing it by yourself. You can only do so much. You have X amount of capacity, but it does not go, your capacity doesn't double with the next person. It doesn't quadruple. It actually becomes exponentially larger at that point because then you have all of their capacity and all their capacity. But the thing that you have to worry about is communication. If you have 4 concurrent activities or theaters of war in that moment, nothing's going to become the priority if everything's the priority. So that was really cool. Getting to do that in kind of the mountains of up north, we'll say that. Getting to do that was a lot of fun and getting to learn from it. The outcome was get better as a team and get better as a team doing something that you all enjoy.
I feel very blessed. One of the previous organizations that I worked for did this really well and was well known for having really, really interesting, good, memorable retreats for the staff. And I'm so thankful for that time and so many of those experiences. And I'll probably mention several of them at some point. So I'll do one because I have a ranked list because I remember all of them, which is impressive because there's some of them, were at this point 15 years ago. One that sticks out was the first time that was ever an international trip. And I was actually on the committee that helped plan this one. And I remember having this conversation with my boss saying, hey, we should leave the country. And she's looking at me like, are you serious? We usually go to like Chattanooga. It's, we drive an hour. We're not flying to another country. But I was like, no, for real. We should leave. We should go to another country. And I had a contact in the Bahamas.
Cool.
And they let us stay for astronomically cheap at their site. And that allowed us to spend most of the retreat budget on airfare. So, and we, what memorable about it, we were able to serve there. They had this community that was a former leper colony that now housed AIDS victims. And so we were serving them and ministering to them as part of our stay. And it was just eye-opening. And then while we were there, we went cliff jumping off of this jungle creek. And so I remember jumping off of this cliff that was 50 feet up going, whose idea was this? And of course, like all my coworkers are these super intense, like adrenaline folks. And I'm not. Like I scream like a 10-year-old girl, Nice. That's probably insulting to 10-year-old girls. I screamed like a much younger person, but it was terrifying.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I remember like that experience. Like I remember the whole way down, and I remember some of my coworkers doing backflips above me because they went up past the 50-foot.
Right.
I was like, are you serious?
You out of your mind?
But the other thing, I'm so thankful you mentioned outcomes and goals and reasons for having it because that organization was very big into community but also training and teaching and development. And on that retreat, we did a lot of worldview training and trying to understand what lens are we viewing the world from, and had a speaker come in and do that. And he's like, great. All right. Now we're going to go talk to strangers and ask them about their worldview. So what happens if you die? And we're like, what?
Can we go back to the cliff?
Like you know, I'm like, that's just as terrifying as the cliff. Yeah. Maybe more, just walking up to people and getting them to answer big questions about life. And
do you think a catalytic event has to have an aha moment?
Oh man, it's not on my list.
And that's the episode for today.
I didn't put that on the kind of 10 components list. I would say it has to be memorable.
Okay.
And
positively or negatively?
Either one can be a catalyst, but
sure.
We would rather attend and plan a positive memory.
Yeah.
But if I think of how we view catalytic events at Workplace Solutions, it's this idea that it's this thing that happens rarely, helps kickstart the real work or the hard work of what comes next in the day-to-day.
Right.
Yeah, there has to be some realization that whatever change you're trying to accomplish, whether that's bringing your team together, whether that's learning a particular lesson, there has to be a recognition of that. But if the goal of the catalyst, you know, in that context was, hey, we want to bring this team together and have them care about each other and trust each other and understand each other better and understand the world and how we interact with it better, then yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah, I would say having an aha moment is another way that the memory sticks.
Right.
So maybe there.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because in sales organizations, you have a sales and marketing kickoff every year, and it's meant to be a catalytic event. More often than not, it's here's how our products change, how our pricings change. By the way, here's how your comp structure changes, things like that. But they are also great community building events. I did one in a previous role where we went to New Orleans, and it was this wonderful time, but it was 190 people coming together in New Orleans from internationally. And so it was like, ooh, I don't know if we grew closer as a team. I feel like I grew closer to certain individuals as you're going through Bourbon Street and being like, I'm going back to my hotel room kind of thing. But also understanding it's like, all right, well, what's the outcome for it? Is it to grow closer together? Is it to have an aha moment? We had a great teacher. I think I walked away with probably a full notebook full of notes that I still utilize today. But I couldn't tell you what was like the one kicker that I'll remember it for. I'll remember inappropriate stories from that weekend probably more.
But you remembered it. So how do you tie that learning together? Some thoughts as you just want to respond to them because you said some interesting things. One, if you go back to episode 2, we cover kind of 4 categories of why people do team building events and you can hear an in-depth conversation about that. 2, you mentioned a team of 190 people. We would not consider a group of people, 190 individuals, a team.
Correct.
By the definition of team that we operate under. Doesn't mean you can't do things with that group of people, but that's an organization.
Right. We are a department.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, that's you can't have close relationships with 190 people.
Right.
You can't have mutual accountability with 190 people.
We're an incoming chemistry freshman class.
Yeah.
That's what we are.
But the terms matter because the terms define the outcome. So if this isn't a team, we can't have a team goal because we're not a team and we can't hold each other accountable in the same, we're not in a relationship. But that's a rabbit hole I just want to chase down that we're not going to finish right now.
Yeah. All right. So one more question for you. Being a part of talent acquisition, I tend to talk with people who you can always tell when they're very well prepared or coached because they kind of talk in colloquialisms. Okay. For you...
Give an example.
I don't have any weaknesses. I guess my biggest weakness is I'm too much of a team player. Oh my gosh. And I'm just like, cool, okay. But things like that, things where they're taking questions that we want to know, are you self-aware? And they don't understand that. And they're like, this is why I'm the best. And it's like, okay, you can't say you're emotionally intelligent if you can't get to emotional awareness first. So my question to you is, what is colloquialism that you've heard about teaming well or teamwork in general that you think is actually more toxic than helpful? Or even a principle. It doesn't have to be a colloquialism. I'll tell you the one that I heard today.
Yeah.
That made me...
If you have one on your mind, you tell me, and let's see if that stirs my imagination.
Yeah. Entry-level sales position. Guy came in, knocked it out of the park, did a bang-up job. And he almost lost me at the end that he was like, I just want to be at a place that we can work hard and we can play hard together. And I was like, okay, explain that. What does that mean? Well, like, I want to put in my 40 to 50 hours a week, and then I want to go get obliterated with my team. That's how we build camaraderie. How do you define obliterated? Because if you guys are going to go play 36 holes of golf and you're exhausted, that's a lot different than trying to find the bottom of a bottle together.
Yeah.
And it is that sort of thing, especially in that sales environment, you tend to see a lot of that. You kind of commiserate and celebrate through vices. And I don't think sales is alone in that, but it's much more, I mean, watch Wolf of Wall Street. Parental advisory warnings. But having that, I think when I hear that, I'm like, ooh, if I heard that from a candidate, I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. If I hear that from an organization, I'm like, ooh, is that everybody's reality? Or is that just sales? Or is that just leadership who has the money? It depends on what that looks like. Because, yeah, if you're putting your time in and you're doing big, hard work, and then you're like, everybody, we're taking a team trip together. Cool. Was that as a, hey, I'm sorry for the crap you went through? Or is it, hey, thank you for the hard work. Let's celebrate together.
I'm thinking more at the organizational level that comes to mind. And I'm not going to name this company by name because it's not just them.
Sure.
But I think of organizations, large companies that don't have good records of treating their employees well, having to urinate in a bottle.
Yeah.
Because you have to get a certain number of items.
Right. Exactly.
And then you see these PR campaigns saying, hey, it's a great place to work. And I'm skeptical by nature. So when I see a PR campaign that X is a great place to work, I'm immediately going like, what are you trying to hide? I would love to see a vision of a world where instead of paying a PR firm or marketing firm a whole bunch of money to make these beautifully done inspirational commercials to show what a great working environment it was, what if you just treated your employees with respect?
Right.
What if you just treated them like human beings?
Right.
Can we just start there? I was having this realization at the same time. I was reading some articles on different things that folks do to improve productivity and satisfaction and retention in the workplace. And I had this realization that a lot of the research is at call centers.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone who understands organizational psychology knew that already, but I didn't. Call centers have become, from a research standpoint, the college students of all the social psych studies.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, we had a 25% increase in people liking their job by the fact that they could decorate their cubicle. And I'm going, you didn't let them decorate their cubicle?
Yeah.
You did. Like, are they cattle? and we're not saying that all, call centers are inherently evil or automatically treat folks without respect. But I'm just going like, hey, how low is our bar that something like that would have that big of an impact? What that tells me is not what the article is trying to say, which is when you do these kind of things, it improves productivity. It's saying that's probably a really crappy place to work, and anything that shows an ounce of humanity is going to make a difference. And that just breaks my heart in half. I see that and I go, I want to, whether you're using Workplace Solutions or somebody else, like, I just want to go in there and be like, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. And the inherent pressure that you have to have in that of who is the ultimate customer? Is it the person buying your product? Is it the person selling your product? What are you doing in that space to better understand the needs? And can you make sure that the expectations and the desires are aligned, or is there so big of a gap that miscommunication happens and you have these horror stories of, hey, if you don't get your 20 boxes done in the next 22 minutes, like you don't get a bathroom break. Didn't we do this in the Industrial Revolution once before? I watched Peaky Blinders. I think so.
Hey, we need volunteers to go into this coal mine and just tell us when the canary dies.
Right.
Who wants to be a canary? You go on LinkedIn, you're like, we're now hiring canaries.
Yep, precisely.
Teddy, thank you for hanging out with
pleasure,
us
Mark.
today. My guest has been Teddy Sanders, wonderful human being. Any final thoughts?
Thank you for the opportunity. I think that we are in a interesting time in the workplace as a whole. You're going to have a lot of people like yourself, Mark, who have found their passion after years of developing it and being able to take their shingle and say, hey, this is the value that I present. And I'm excited to see where that grows and goes for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Have a good night.
Bye.
Life is way too short for work to suck. So if you want help to build your team, train your team, or manage your team, we're here. Come see us at workplaysolutions.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast. So we can edit out silence so I can think as long as I need to.